I was ready.
You were ready.
You did something different.
I did. I tried to go high pitched, and I realized that when I do that, I scream. So
I
tried
also
to
think
take the
that
volume
Gus
down.
didn't like that.
No, Gus
pitch.
was not a fan of that. What is up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 294. Fun episode tonight because it is our 6th year anniversary of doing Ginger Runner Live. 6 years is a long time.
Do you feel 6 years old?
Yeah. Well, 6 years older than when I first started the show, for sure.
A lot has changed since you started this show. At the beginning, I still lived in Canada. You were down in Los Angeles, nestled away in a little garage, I think, was your first.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that at the top of the show. Our guest tonight, Jade de Rosa, is going to be talking to us all about this last weekend's race. She just attempted the Orcas 100, the Orcas Island 100, which is a really difficult 100-mile race here in Washington State on Orcas Island during a time of year that inevitably gets weather and storms, and it's just has this history of being a really, really rough race. She has completed it before. She's completed some of the biggest ultras in the country, like really tough ultras. But this weekend, she had a DNF and had probably one of the best DNFs and is coming out of it with joy. And it was one of those things, I saw her post about it. I saw it. I was like, I could relate immediately to it. And I thought it would be a great topic of conversation for a show, talking to someone like Jade, who is at that top echelon, finishing high on podiums and finishing really difficult races, having an experience like this and how it's maybe shaped her running. We'll talk to her about a lot of subjects in tonight's show on episode number 294 of Ginger Runner Live. Sit back, relax. The show begins now. Ginger Runner. Yay! What is up, everybody? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 294. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy Mondays to spend a little bit of it with us. And let me thank you now for being with us Monday after Monday for 6 years. This is our 6th year anniversary of doing Ginger Runner Live. As Kim sort of mentioned in the pre-show, we've been doing this in all sorts of environments, all different times of year. It started in a garage. Ginger Runner Live has really evolved. The Ginger Runner channel has evolved. But I remember episode 0, the pilot, took place in a garage of a house that I was living in with a bunch of people at the time. And over the course of years has graduated from a garage to a foyer to another garage to a small, tiny room in Los Angeles. The backgrounds changed. What I sat on changed. The introduction of Kim as co-host.
I wasn't always part of the show.
You weren't always part of the show when we started because we were living so far apart. But
Correct.
then when we moved in together, you were part of the show from another room. And
I would email Ethan questions from, like, I would watch it in the other room, email you questions that I just happened to see in the chat room. It's evolved.
It has evolved because it's just grown. And we have viewers that come back Monday after Monday to watch this show live, or they listen to the podcast. Maybe you're listening to the podcast right now. And it's just one of those things that I didn't think would still be going on. It is a show that I enjoy doing every single Monday. We get to talk to some fantastic people. Tonight is no exception. We'll have Jade de Rosa joining us on tonight's show in just a second. But we just get to experience this incredible community grow and grow and grow. So for the last 6 years, we've done 294 episodes. Obviously, the math doesn't work out to every single Monday, and that's because we do take time during the holidays to breathe. But it is something that we enjoy doing every single Monday and will continue to do as long as we can, as long as our viewers will have us, really.
Yes.
It's become a big part of the channel and a big part of our routine and our work life, and we just absolutely love it. So congratulations, everyone, on reaching 6 years. Here's to 294 episodes. Let's get into this one. So it is not just myself hosting, as you well know.
It's not?
No, the person to my right, to your left, has also been a huge part of making this show successful. Who are you?
Your wife.
Well, you're more than that.
What is up, you guys? Kim Tashima Newberry here, as always. If you're new to the show, welcome. I feel like we have a lot of new viewers every week, which is really cool. I get to see new names in the chat room. I interact with you guys in the chat room. If you have questions for our wonderful guest, Jade, that we'll be bringing on shortly, please ask them in the chat room.
Yes. And
I'd be curious to go back to see when my first show was, to see how long I've actually been on the show.
Maybe it's a trivia question we ask. We are planning a big 300th episode. The reason why we're not doing a huge 6-year celebration is because 300 episodes is just around the corner. About a month and a half from now, we'll be doing 300th episode celebration. And we'll probably do something much, much bigger and grander. I realized...
I mean, you put on a sweater tonight.
It's because it's cold in our tiny room. One of these days, we will be able to do the show from a space that has some sort of... Heat would be great. That'd be a great start. We're taking small baby steps. It's taken us 6 years to get into a room.
With 2 chairs.
With 2 chairs. Next stage, a room, 2 chairs, and a source of heat. So right now, it's the sweater. We are, before we introduce our wonderful guests tonight, we do have some individuals we'd like to thank, and that is our Patreon crew. The wonderful supporters over at patreon.com/thegingerrunner who support us week after week, month after month. They allow us to do this live show, all of our reviews, films, travel, all of that good stuff. It is because of them that we're able to do this as a full-time job, which is fantastic. And a big shout out to everyone who registered for Tiger Claw. In case you did not know, last Thursday, Tiger Claw registration opened at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and closed by 11:45 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We sold out the race in less than 4 hours, which is incredible. We did not expect it. It happened, and we are so excited for May 2nd rolling up here sooner than we expect. Our guest tonight comes to us from the state of Washington, which is actually pretty cool. She's just a few hours north of us. And is just an incredible ultra runner, badass athlete who it's taken us too long to get her on the show. She really is making a splash in the scene and has for the last few years. And it's exciting to have her on the show. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome for the first time, Jade de la Rosa.
Yay!
Hey! How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good.
We're great.
First of all,
the first things. Go ahead.
We need a doggo introduction because people in the chat room will be requesting names soon.
Yeah, this is Cashew.
Cashew.
Yeah.
Oh, got the little ear. The ears just went.
Yeah, like I heard my name. Is Cashew a trail runner? Is Cashew a part of the adventure team?
He is. Yeah, he's done up to 14 miles with Nick and I. So he's just a little guy. He's only 15 pounds, but
wow.
Yeah, he loves it.
We have a little 19.5 pounder, and he's a little chub right now, so maybe 20.5 pounds. And the longest we've managed to take him is about 6 miles. He gets real winded. We haven't worked up his endurance, so that's impressive. 15 miles for a small pup.
Yeah. Yeah, he's fast.
Cashew also looks more streamlined than Gus.
It's air resistance. Cashew has none of it. Super aerodynamic. So let's start with, let's get a little bit of who you are, because maybe some of our audience is familiar with you, but I want everyone to know who you are, because you really are making a splash in the trail running scene, ultra scene. I feel like you've run some of the big races here on the West Coast, especially. What got you into ultras? How long have you been running ultras specifically, or trails, or where does the love of the trail sort of evolve from? What is your connection to it?
Yeah, I got into ultras mostly from meeting Nick. I met Nick, my husband, at the end of 2012, and the first race he had me come crew at was Barkley. And I had never heard of ultra marathons before that, basically, and all of a sudden I was just thrown right into the deep end of, of the races. That's definitely the crazier side of things, and
no doubt.
Yeah, I was not totally ready to sign up after that. I think it took another year before I tried my first 50K, and I absolutely loved it. And yeah, it's built from there.
For those unfamiliar, Jade is also married to Nicodemus Holland, who we've had on the show before. And Barkley finisher, also an incredible athlete as well. So I'm assuming we will probably talk a little bit about Nick tonight too, and just sort of his story and your journey together and stuff like that. Were you going to say something?
I was just thinking, like, I mean, I remember my first ultra experience, and it was crewing you for like a 50K at the North Face 50
Yeah, like
in
North Face 50.
San Francisco. Like, very like, oh,
Everything's
you're
cookie
like,
cutter
you can go
taken
get
care
on this
of.
shuttle and it takes you here. And,
Shuttles.
and I mean, the weather was bad that day, but I remember being like, at the end of the day, being like, I'm exhausted. This is extreme. So I can't imagine being in your shoes.
Barkley.
And because we've been to Barkley as well. And
Yeah.
it is very different and like on the extreme side of extreme. So good for you for actually falling in love with the sport after that.
Yeah, it was a totally interesting experience. It was also the first time that I met Nick's parents, his dad and his mom, and we were all staying like in a hotel room together. So that was its own experience.
I'm picturing all of this and thinking, how did you come out of this with a love or affinity for trail running? Because I would think any human would be like, what the heck is going on? So, okay, so that's sort of like the introduction for you then. Where was your first race? Like, what was that first experience where it was Jade crushing trails and like falling in love with it?
Yeah, my first trail race was in 2013. I signed up for a random half marathon outside of Carmel. And I'd never done a trail race before, so I had no idea that we'd be like actually running up hills and stuff. And it was a total sufferfest for me. I couldn't believe that people did this. And that was actually the first time that I met David and Megan Roach. And, I think that they were just sort of starting their rise in the sports, but I remember them coming in first and second, like, I don't know, an hour and a half before me, and just totally being baffled that someone could run that fast.
We've had them on the show a number of times. They're obviously good friends of the show and our coaches and stuff like that. It is awesome to have someone like that who is so fast and they crush these races so quickly, but also they're so human and you know so open about everything. I want to talk a little bit about Orcas because obviously your journey from that trail half marathon, from the early days of crewing at Barkley to tackling these big races. Orcas Island 100 is by no means a slouch 100 miler. Of course, I also believe there's no such thing as a slouch 100 miler, but what is it that's really drawn you to these really difficult races? Because you do take on big challenges like this. What drew you to Orcas and to these big challenges?
So much of it for me is being able to experience different places and get to go to really cool places just with my own 2 feet. I mean, that's what drew me to Zion. That was my first 100. And then Cascade Crest looked really cool. And San Diego and Orcas, of course. And just the chance to get to kind of see how far I can push myself. I mean, coming at it from the perspective of following Nick into the sport and knowing that Nick was seen as this guy who just tackles like the world's hardest races, right?
Right.
So there was immediately a little bit of curiosity in me, like, is it possible that I can try to take that on too?
I like that. And what do you think was the first experience for you that really challenged you in that way, in a way that's sort of beyond the distance is the challenge, and definitely kind of put you in that space of this is beyond anything that I've experienced thus far, and I'm in a new world here that I need to sort of navigate and figure out?
Yeah, the first one wasn't a race, but it was rim to rim to rim. That was like the first big trail event, I guess, that I had done that was longer than 13 miles, and all of a sudden, I'm running back and forth across the Grand Canyon. And that was my first time seeing the Grand Canyon too. Like, I didn't actually see it until I was inside of it. But yeah, that totally had me really outside of my comfort zone and really wondering, how is it possible that I'm doing this?
Did you do that one with Nick as well? Like, did you have someone with you? Yeah.
Yeah, I ran it with Nick.
I can imagine. I mean, the few times that we've experienced the canyon, it's just kind of one of those like, it's so big. It's just so big and vast that you immediately feel small.
Yeah.
Talking about Orcas, let's talk a little bit about this race because obviously the results probably weren't what you had planned on, but what got you to the Orcas 100? Because I know you had planned on the Hurt 100 this year, and what sort of played out that got you to the island in the first place?
Yeah, so exactly. I was supposed to run Hurt, and I'd signed up for that back in July. So of course I spent like 6 months training for it. I had DNF'd at Hurt last year. Nick and I both ran it, and he ended up going to the ER partway through, and so that sort of messed with me, and I ended up dropping at like mile 67, something like that.
Right.
So I had plans to come back because I really wanted the chance to finish it. And then on the way to the airport, and this gets more into, kind of our journey with Nick's mental health issues over the last couple of years. But on the way to the airport to Hawaii, we basically decided this isn't sustainable. We have to try something else. And that for us meant Nick going to a treatment center that Monday. So instead, Hurt was off the table, and Nick went into a treatment center. And then it was kind of time for me to figure out what I wanted to do over the next month.
I obviously want to talk a bit about that, just because I know that you've been very public with talking. Nick has been open with talking with mental health struggles and what you guys have been going through. At that time, you had obviously been planning on going to Hawaii to run Hurt. The decision was made not to. At that point, were you thinking of other projects? Is that not even on the table or in your mind at that point? Is it all about, let's just make sure everything is good before we even think about next stages, or what's kind of going through your mind there?
Yeah, thinking about, what 100 am I going to run in this place kind of thing wasn't at the forefront of my mind. It was more figuring out what's the best step for us here. And going into Hurt, something had felt off. I have a big fear of flying, and I think at times I've thought going into Hawaii that like, okay, well, the reason something feels off inside of me is because I have to get on this flight. And so leading up to Hurt, I thought, okay, maybe this is just that, I'm having a whole bunch of flight anxiety stuff. But as it got closer and closer, I was able to sort of sort it through and realize, no, that's not what's going on. It's something that's kind of pulling inside of me and saying, hey, we have to reevaluate the situation and find a different answer.
With Orcas, it's obviously much closer to home. It's a race that you have run before. You're familiar with the course, the trails, the conditions, which are always a roll of the dice. Was it, I have this training, I put in all this time, I would like to use it and test it, let's go to Orcas? Or was it are there other goals beyond Orcas, and this is just like another sort of step in achieving those? What was that?
Yeah, it felt very much like, look, I've put in all of this time, and I really want to be able to run 100 and just see how I feel with all the training that I've done. And like you're saying, it's really close to home. I've ran it before, so I sort of knew what to expect. And it felt like in some ways, okay, this can be like my last big thing before we move to Arizona. So in that way, it kind of felt like a good fit.
We're going to dig in a little bit deeper here. But before we do, of course, we are live with Jade De La Rosa. So if you have any live questions, feel free to jump into the chat room and ask away. Kim's pulled a couple aside there. Kim, what do you have as far as questions?
Yeah, there's a question from Nancy just in regards to balance. Nancy says, how do you fit in work and training all together? Do you have a day job? Or are you just a sponsored athlete? How do you do it all?
Yeah, I'm a freelance writer, and then I've taken on running coaching recently, which has definitely helped balance out the instability of being a freelance writer. I think I'm lucky that I like getting up early, so it's relatively easier for me to fit in training kind of first thing in the morning. And again, because I'm freelance, I'm grateful that I have the ability to kind of have a flexible work schedule.
I want to get into Orcas just because you start something like Orcas, you know what's ahead of you. You finished it before, so you know that it's a day. It's a day of big climbs, lots of descent, mud in this case.
You've probably been following the social media and you've been seeing the pictures of the
snow, the small
what
rivers
used to be the trail, which is now a waist deep puddle
so
lake.
You're starting this race with all this knowledge ahead of time, and you've started many hundreds in the past. So what were things on track early? Were things sort of off the rails to begin with? Where did things sort of shift for you, or where were they at least towards the start?
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with myself and my family the night before the race. And again, it was like something inside of me saying, this doesn't feel quite right.
Mm.
But I felt like I owed it to myself to start anyway and see what would happen, as if like I needed to give myself the opportunity. Um, so I mean, like I ended up doing one loop, so 25 miles, and it was fantastic. Like everything felt great. My fitness felt there. It felt casual. I had a lot of fun talking with some of the other people, but I just didn't have that same drive that I might normally have to finish 100. Like the value of it wasn't there for me that
Mm.
day.
Mm. I, having had an experience at Headlands this last year in 2019, where there came a point where that drive and that fight to sort of finish wasn't as strong as the happiness for being where I was at that time. I
Hmm.
like I have a real connection to that, and it sort of resonated with me. Your post when you posted a wonderful photo of you smiling after DNFing at Orcas this last weekend, and sort of talking about the joy that you felt as making that decision. Um, how did that differ from times before where you've made a similar decision, where you've had to pull out of a race, or um, how did your mindset change in looking at a DNF? Like, what was kind of going through your mind there, knowing you were going to DNF, having made that sort of conscious decision, and how does it compare to previous Jade?
Yeah. Again, a lot of this goes back to me sort of like following along with Nick's mental health journey. We've talked a lot in his past about his issues, I guess, with DNFs. I came into the sport from him, and so I learned from him. His perspective at the time was, you don't DNF. Like you're a
Mm.
weak person if you DNF, unless you've been like pulled from the race because you have some like life-threatening injury. You just don't drop. So I had that for the first few years of my ultra experience, I guess. I sort of had that deep fear at the back of my mind, like, oh my God, I'm going to disappoint him or disappoint others, or I'm going to disappoint myself if I drop.
Yeah.
And then seeing him sort of start to uncover, I guess, like his journey with running over the
Mm.
past 10 years, and what that actually meant, and how even if he did finish races and get course records, he wasn't truly happy with who he was, because it was such a fleeting thing. So that made me in turn kind of reevaluate my relationship with running as well, and realize it totally comes down to myself. Like I have to be in a good place mentally, and even if I don't finish the race, it has no judgment on who I am as a person. And I guess running Orcas this past weekend, I felt that more than I ever have before.
Mm.
I felt really in line um, with my own values, I guess.
It's funny because I felt the same. And I think this is what resonated with me and Kim as well, because we had a conversation after reading your post, just sort of like, this is really great to see. Um, I remember early on in my, again, I'm going to say ultra career, and I realize it's not a career. It literally is just running ultras for a few years, but since
That's still a
2012,
career.
yeah, we'll call it a
It's
career.
something.
It's a career. Um, since 2012, I remember early on that was sort of something I also took in through reading books and seeing blog posts and race recaps, was that a DNF was the absolute last choice.
Right.
You had to be missing a leg, you had to be bitten by
Right.
rattlesnakes and dying on the side of trail, and even then, if you can get the anti-venom, you're finishing. Like finishing by all means possible. A DNF was just one. It was a public failure, and I remember
Yeah.
it just sort it. It's not like someone told me that. It's just sort of the feeling and that sort of thing. Where do you think that comes from? Because maybe it's something that new people get, but where do you think that it comes from, and how can we sort of dispel that? Because it sounds like you had a shift and it's different
Yeah.
for you?
I don't know. I mean, and this is probably not the most popular of opinions, but I think a lot of people do the sport looking for a sort of validation, that they're missing something from themselves or they haven't fully worked that out. And so they're looking to make that up by proving themselves at a race. So for me, I think it's more like self-reflection and realizing that you're valuable no matter what happens at a race. I mean, something that I thought a lot about this past weekend was when I finished Zion 100, it was kind of a disaster year as well. Like we had a horrible rainstorm halfway through and the course got super, super slick and muddy. And so they ended up shortening the course to 92 miles. And so I ended up finishing 92 miles. And the first thing my mother-in-law said was, well, you have to go out now and like run an actual 100 to prove that you can. And it's like, I've just run 92 miles. I don't have anything to prove. But I think that's a really common sentiment. And there's these kind of arbitrary numbers that, okay, well, I have to run 100 miles and then I'll be a real ultra runner or something like that.
It was a similar situation when I ran my first 50 miler. The course was quite a bit short. And I remember you even saying like, oh, well, my watch only got blah, blah, blah. And I was like, but it was my first 50 miler. And I had that, like, I felt that outside pressure because all I could hear from the outside were people telling me, oh, but the course was so short. And so there was this
Yeah.
weird underlying like, man, now I have to go run like a real 50 miler.
My goal is
Right.
incomplete, even though I crossed
Yeah.
that finish line and I got that
Right.
award or got that beer or whatever.
Yeah.
It's still incomplete, purely based off of a number.
But then you have the internal dialogue going, but wait, I ran like 46 miles or 47 miles.
Yeah, how is that a
That's
failure?
something.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
We do have live questions. I realize you pulled a couple aside here, so let's get to some of those too.
This is interesting and something I was hoping was going to come up during the show because I also had questions regarding this. We have Maria Delta in the chat room, and Maria says, "Hi, Jade. In what ways does your competitive dancing background influence running, if at all? And if you follow Jade on Instagram or if you know Jade in person, you've likely seen the wonderful dancing videos that have been posted. So can you share a little bit about that with us?"
Yeah, I started ballroom dancing when I was in high school. My mom likes to say that my grandma was like a champion ballroom dancer back in the Netherlands. And so she signed my brother and I up for ballroom dancing, and it didn't last very long because I think I was 16 and he was 14, and he was still at the age where like girls have cooties. So that didn't last long. Then when I got to college, I was still interested in doing it, and I found a local teacher, and I was very shy and introverted. I mean, I still am, but even more so 10 years ago. And he encouraged me to try a competition anyways and just see what it was like. So I did, and I had a lot of fun. And when I moved back to Bellingham, which is where I went to college too, I was able to find the same teacher and reconnected and started dancing again. And yeah, it's been fun to throw myself back out there because it's definitely something that is very, very uncomfortable to me.
The videos, if you get a chance, we'll obviously shout out your Instagram and stuff like that. But if our viewers get a chance to go to Jade's Instagram, you'll see videos and stuff of. Was it a recent dance competition? It was before Christmas, but was it a competition or was it just kind of getting back into training?
Yeah, it was a dance competition. It was Seattle Starball.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I act like I know that. I don't know that. My reaction was very much like, oh,
Is
the
that
Starball.
where you've been on Wednesdays?
No, but I'm trying to be better. But I do remember it being covered on the news. There was the name sounded familiar. That's why because I remember seeing it on the news. That's great. That's fantastic. I'll let Kim get to one more question.
A question from Marie in the chat room. Marie says, Jade, do you have a threshold in mind about what would make you quit a race, or is a DNF something that doesn't even cross your mind at the starting line?
I think it's if my heart's not in it, which feels really different from just giving up because something's hard. And again, like Orcas kind of showed that to me. My heart wasn't in it. It didn't feel like something that I wanted to be doing, regardless of how difficult it was, and how much harder I knew it was going to be. So I think yeah, I think being able to dig that out of myself, I guess, and realize the difference between suffering and value.
I want to talk a little bit just about mental health as something. It's a topic that we talk about on the show regularly, and we have decidedly in the last few years been much more open to talk about our dealings. As someone who deals with anxiety and has dealt with it since I was a kid, regular, ongoing, daily struggle. It's kept me from getting on planes. It's kept me from starting races. It's kept me from all sorts of things that bring me
Yeah.
joy in life. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say that when Jade was talking about, the flight
Mm,
anxiety, when you were saying that, Jade, I just related that back to similar situations that we've had in this house.
mhm. Where I either haven't gone to the airport and
Yeah.
caught a flight because of whatever. Even though my flight left in like an hour and a half, there have been times where I looked at Kim and said, it's not happening. Uh, Barely made it to Headlands last year. It was one of
Yeah.
those where everything was sort of piling up and barely made it onto that flight as I was standing in line to get onto the flight. It's kind of one of those. I obviously relate when someone else shares their experiences that fall into that similar vein because it's
Hmm.
so personal. And so when you hear
Right.
someone else mention, I also deal with it in a similar capacity.
Yeah.
Does trail running or ultra running help? It does it allow you to sort of face these things head on? Is it like exposure for you, or where does it manifest in your lives and how it affects ultra running? Because it does sound like it affects it similarly to how it affects it for me from time to time.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I remember when I ran Orcas in 2017, I didn't think I'd be able to start that race because I remember having
Mm.
so much anxiety just getting on the flight from San Diego to Seattle.
That's right,
And then
because
I
you were living in
remember,
SoCal at the
yeah,
time. That's right. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I remember landing there and feeling like, wow, well, that was the hardest part, you know? And then meanwhile, I'm running 100 miles the next day. But for me, like the flying is what's so challenging.
Mm. It seems you and Nick have also talked openly about both your struggles and again, I am just so happy that people like you in your position who do finish races at the top of the podium and have for a long time and have this really wonderful connection with ultra running and the space and the community have been so open in talking about both your struggles. Um, was that a conscious decision? Had you and Nick talked sort of about like, let's be open with this, let's share this with the community? Was it something you knew could help people, or was it a we need to put this out there, maybe we can get help, or what was sort of the decision making behind being so public and open with it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was wanting to feel authentic on a platform that often doesn't feel super authentic. It felt unfair to be posting like beautiful photos of like here we are running on top of some beautiful ridgeline in the sunshine, and then meanwhile, we're going to like couples therapy and individual therapy, and Nick's on medication, and we're like dealing with really hard issues like suicide and self harm, and I didn't want it to seem like, oh, their life is perfect, and to make someone else feel like they're alone in their struggles, I guess.
Hmm.
It didn't feel real.
Have you been getting a lot of comments and feedback from people, friends, community, family? Has it been hard? Has it been therapeutic?
Yeah, it's been really nice. It's been overwhelming at times. Like I've been surprised at how many people have kind of come out and been like, "Oh no, I totally get that. I've suffered with this, or my partner has suffered with this, or a family member or a friend." And in that way, it's been really nice, just to know that I'm not alone. And even as a caretaker too, like it's been nice as well to know that I'm not the only caretaker out there, and I can share my own issues with it with someone else.
You are in a unique position. It's something that we don't often talk about on the show when we do talk about like my dealing with anxiety or how it affects our relationship. It's often not covered like how do the partners sort of deal with that? And we get that question actually quite often, where someone will express, I am the partner of someone who suffers from anxiety, depression, something like that. Um, or someone who does suffer from it doesn't know how to communicate with their partner in a way that they would understand, or maybe they don't understand what they're going through. Do you have any
Mhm.
advice for those individuals, or anything that you've learned, having been someone who suffers to some degree, but then also is a caregiver? Do you have any advice or insight into anything in that space?
Yeah, yeah, I'm definitely making sure that you have your own team behind you. You know, like it's great for the person suffering from mental illness to have therapists and whatever they need. But I think it's really important for the caretaker to also have a therapist. I feel like that's honestly what's gotten me through the past 2 years, is having someone I can go to weekly and who kind of make sure she makes sure that I like she's the one person who's looking out specifically for me, right?
Mm,
Because so much of the time I end up giving myself to Nick, because his issues are the ones that take precedence just because of how serious they are.
right.
So it's nice to have like that hour each week to be like, okay, how are you making sure you're making time for yourself? Are you still seeing friends? Are you still are you still communicating with your family? Are you getting to enjoy your runs? Are you having good sleep every night? I think it's easy to kind of just get swept up with making sure the other person's okay, but you end up really, really drained.
I can only imagine. I mean, I know it's exhausting. Obviously, just day to day. Are you? Do you use training as a tool? Is it something that just sort of fits in with everything that you guys go through? Is it something you look forward to? Does it have its challenges as well, like fitting in the training and everything?
Yeah, for me, running right now kind of feels like the one thing that is fully mine, that I can kind of control. I get to process it however I like. I
Mm.
can just be out there by myself with music or just my thoughts or a podcast or something, and it's completely separate from whatever is going on at home or in my relationship.
Got it. Again,
Yeah.
we have lots of really great live questions here. Kim, go for it.
Yeah, question from Vivian. Vivian says, Jade, when you hit a low point, what do you do that motivates you to push on?
Um, I like to think back on other training that I've done, other workouts that have been really hard, or especially like if I'm dreading something coming up in a race, um, thinking back to something that was much harder and just knowing that I could get through that, using a lot of comparison. If we're
Go
talking
for it.
about mental health, it's a different story.
Got it. Go for it.
There's a couple questions. This one comes from Adam, and Adam asks, "Why the move to Arizona? Personal, professional training?"
um, Mostly for sun.
What is that?
We got a
I
little
mean,
today,
Yeah.
and it was one of those like, oh, there it is. That's what it's like. Oh,
yeah, I'm from BC originally. So I grew up knowing this weather, and then I moved to San Diego for 7 years, and I think I got totally spoiled by what it means to be able to wear shorts year round,
right.
and I'm a wimp now with the rain, so
We living in California. I was there for about 10 years, and
Mhm.
also having grown up in the Northwest in Seattle was like sunshine. I don't know if I'm gonna like this. And you live in LA for 10 years, and by the end of it, you're like, that's all. That's all I know now is
Yeah.
sunshine. I don't know how to deal with rain or weather or layers. It's been weird to kind of adapt back to what I grew up with. It's felt like, oh, I get it. I remember this. But there's that point, and it's happened this month. This is the first time in a long time where I'm just like, where the fuck is the sun? What happened to the heat? So
Yeah,
we're
this
envious. Like,
this
you're gonna have a
winter has
great trip.
been,
yeah,
like, exceptionally dreary.
Very dreary this year.
yes, it's
Yeah.
been tough.
So that's exciting though that you get to go back towards land of sun. Have you visited there before? Do you know the region that you're moving to, like trails? Or is there gonna be places to explore and all that good stuff?
Yeah, yeah, we're gonna be down in Sedona. Nick went to school in
Beautiful.
Flagstaff, so we made lots of road trips out there early in our relationship, so we know the area super well and love the sunshine and the access to trails, and it's a lot closer to our family in SoCal.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've gotten through there, I guess, once as trail runners, and it was spectacular. Like being near Flagstaff and Sedona was just a
It's
standout.
beautiful.
So beautiful. I want to again kind of talk a bit about the DNF and you learning from it, and maybe how people who are watching this and listening to Jade sort of share her experiences um, might be able to look at a DNF differently, or learn from it in a different way, because what I was able to experience at Headlands with mine was pretty transcendent. It was one of those moments after nearly 10 years and doing ultras of just sort of going, oh, it's not what I always imagined. So Jay, do you have any advice or insight into those who may be taking on big challenges that will push them and challenge them, and they might be faced with that decision to some degree? How can they find that line of, yeah, maybe this is a good opportunity to learn from it, or maybe this is one of those moments where you just keep pushing because it's hard?
Yeah, I think again, really listening to your heart, and then in terms of accepting the DNF, I think remembering that it's totally your perspective on the situation. Only you get to decide how you feel about it. And I think so often we get caught up on, oh, well, this person is going to be disappointed, or no, I'm less of a runner because I haven't completed this race. And like you're saying, you get that really cool sort of transcendent feeling from being able to take the power back into your own hands and saying, no, this is what that race meant for me. It was a step. This is what I needed. I had a great day out there, whatever it might be.
Did you stick around for the rest of the event? We had lots of friends that were up there, and know many people who finished that just were talking about the conditions and stuff out there on the course. Did you stay through the weekend, or did you have to come back?
I came back one day early.
How were the conditions? How were they? Because we actually haven't even talked about that part of it.
They were really, really rough. I'm very proud of anyone who just started, honestly. It was very different from 2017 when I did it that year. It was cold. It was in the low 30s, but it was dry the whole time. We had a little bit of snow, and I think it was maybe like 42 or 43 when we started, and rainy. And there were like 6 or 7 different times where I was running through water past my knees. For long sections too.
Sections that would normally not have water, right? Like this abnormal.
Yeah, I mean, like there was water flowing above the bridges. Like you'd be going through water on top of a bridge that's supposed to be the one over top of the river or the creek. Yeah, so it was crazy.
We're going to be out there in a couple weeks. We have a trail running camp that we like to attend every year. It's kind of our tradition, and because one Orcas, I mean, it's gorgeous. It's like a fairyland on an island in the middle of the ocean. But we saw all the pictures and videos and stuff coming back from course marking and like what James and the Rain Shadow crew were doing out there. And we were both just mouth agape, like how the bridge is under the water level. And you'd see people like waist deep going through. This is the regular trail, that sort of thing. Did it ever recede? Like, did the conditions ever improve, or was it 24, 48 hours of that?
I think it just stayed like that the entire time. I don't think it got any better. I mean, I was thinking on that first loop too, it's only going to get worse from here, because now you have, 100 people running this 4 times, and there was snow up on half the course, and it was just going to turn into like a slushy, slippery mess.
Yeah, like Jade said, hats off to those who finished, because just based off of pictures and videos alone and having familiarity with those trails, it did not look fun. It did not look pleasant. It was basically a sufferfest from the start. I can only imagine. So it says a lot. Jade, it's wonderful to have you on the show to talk a little bit about some things that you've just learned, especially at the Orcas 100. Do you have any desire or fighting desire to get back to a race after this DNF? Was it something that you're really content with and you can step away from that race with a feeling of completion? Is there anything driving you to get back out there and race or any of that sort of thing?
Yeah, I have a lot of races planned this spring, but I don't feel the need like I have to get back to Orcas and prove that I can finish it a second time or anything like that. Or, okay, now I have a vendetta against the race, and it's like, 1 Orcas, 0 Jade, and I have to go back and and make that score even. But I am excited to try some different races this spring.
Just looking at your ultra sign up, it's kind of cool to see because you'll be kind of all over the West Coast from Bellingham, Julian, California. By the way, Julian, California, best pie. They are known
Apple
for
pie.
their pie. Yeah, their apple pie is insane good. It's just outside of the Cuyamaca course.
Oh.
Tiny little mountain town outside of San Diego. Zane Gray, that should be really fun. Have you done Zane Gray?
I haven't, no. I crewed Nick there one year, but I haven't done it myself yet.
Because that's up there too with some of the most difficult terrain, right? Extremely technical,
I think it's supposed to be pretty technical, yeah.
Whew. And then Fat Dog 120. I saw that Jade signed up for Fat Dog. Have you completed Fat Dog before?
Nope, no, that'll be my first time.
You're from the region, from BC, so have you trained on those trails or in those mountains at all?
I haven't, honestly. Like, the only like training I've done there was like on a high school ski trip.
Perfect.
Yeah. No, I crewed Nick there. He ran it in 2015, I think. And then we crewed and paced a friend there this past summer, and I was totally re-inspired. And yeah, I think it's really cool to be able to run, I guess, kind of like my home terrain.
That'll be exciting to follow, because I know that you, Nick, also did the West Coast Trail.
I got dog distracted.
I know. Every time the dog head pops up, I was like, I want to talk to Cashew.
I know. He's hearing the rabbits in the background.
Is that?
Yeah.
By the way, also, Jade is worth the follow on social media just to see
just
the
for
array
the tiny critter content.
The critter content alone is like, oh, it's so cute. It's basically like cuteness overload every single day. It's great. But the West Coast Trail trip looked incredible that you and Nick done. Had you done that before, right? Like, was that something fun adventure that you would recommend?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We backpacked it one year and then did like a FKT thing the second time. And either way is absolutely amazing.
You inspire me and a lot of people, Jade, you and Nick. I know it's been a long time since we've had Nick on the show, but there was something during that time when we had him on the show. He must have been in a point in his running career where he was sort of being reflective on his results and that sort of thing. It was a really neat moment because he was obviously very much aware of the races that he had done were very challenging and results had mattered to past Nick, but it seemed almost like he realized that it was more about the experience and stuff moving forward. It was a really neat show. I remember that interview, Ginger Live, a few years back, and it's great to hear you talking about that even with Orcas this 100 this last weekend, because it's something I didn't learn until very recently. So the more people I see that are sort of getting there or have been there, it's inspiring. It's amazing. And you and Nick's openness and talking with your struggles, both as caretaker and sufferer with mental health, it's inspiring. And we really, really appreciate it, because
and it's helping people.
It's helping people. Whether you know it or not, there's people out there who maybe will read a story that you post or something you share and will be inspired or changed or moved, and maybe they'll be more open about it, or maybe they'll seek therapy or find help. And it's a wonderful thing. So thank you so much, Jade, for being so open with everything that you've talked about on social media and on this show.
Thank you.
Do we have a last question for Jade? Because we do have a quickie question quiz that we have to ask as well. It's our first time on the show.
Sure. Yeah. So this question comes from Darren in the chat room, and Darren says, what's the most powerful piece of advice or encouragement that you've gotten, and what was it that resonated or motivated you?
Oh, that's a big question.
You say Darren wrote that one? That's a good question.
Wow.
The most powerful piece of advice or encouragement that you've received?
It's really simple, but I'm really, really fond of what my parents have always told me, which is just try your best. And I mean, that means different things on any given day, and that can apply to a lot of different situations. But I think it's really nice because it just comes down to you and your own effort that you're able to give every time. So yeah, just try your best.
I love that. I love that answer.
I have no problem keeping it simple because it's easy to remember.
Yep.
And you're right. It applies to whoever you are on that day in any capacity. Jade De La Rosa, we appreciate you for being on the show. Thank you so much. Before we move into our after show, you are our first time guest on the show. This is the first time you've been on Ginger Runner Live, which gets us excited because we have a segment that we call the Quickie Question Quiz. It is a series of rapid fire questions. They're all very easy. All you got to do is answer with the first thing that comes to your brain, and we will start when you give us the thumbs up. Here we go. What was your very first race?
Born to run 50K.
Favorite place to run?
El Cajon Mountain in San Diego.
Road or trails?
Trails.
Bucket list race?
The Jungle Ultra Marathon.
Favorite running movie?
Where Dreams Go to Die, obviously.
Hey, good answer. We don't get that one enough, but Jade, she's already scored 100% on this thing. Guilty pleasure TV show?
I like a show called Grownish.
Oh, I've heard of it, but have not.
Is it new?
Yeah, it's like a spin-off of the show Blackish.
Yes.
It's like one of the lead female roles in Blackish now has like her own show called Grownish, and it's her experiences in college, and I don't understand half of what they're talking about or saying, and so it's really fun to watch.
What is your favorite pre-race meal?
I don't know. I'm really easygoing, like anything. But usually something with vegetables, which is like not good advice, but I like 5, I guess.
Favorite post-race meal?
Again, anything, but with kombucha. Lots of kombucha.
Nice. Current running kicks or running shoes? What are you running in?
Ultra Superiors or Escalantes for the road.
And finally, who is your running inspiration?
Probably Nick.
Congratulations, Jade.
Thank
you passed the Quickie Question Quiz.
Yay.
Yay. So our guest tonight, Jade De La Rosa, talks to us all about the Orcas 100, what it was like to face the DNF, the joy that she sort of managed to get out of that sort of experience, a lot of the stuff with mental health. We had just a great time talking with her. We're going to move into our after show for our Patreon subscribers. If you'd like to join us for our after show tonight or past after shows or future after shows, it's very easy. Just got to go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner. But before we do, of course, Jade, where can people find you on social media? Where can they follow up and get more Jade in their life?
Yeah, my website is jadedelarosa.com, and I'm on Instagram at, I think, Jade Rebecca B.
And are you taking new coaching clients currently?
I am, yeah. And again, all that information's on my website too.
Perfect.
Sweet. Go support Jade. Thank Jade for being on the show. You all know the drill. We are going to move into the after show with Jade. So go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner. We do have one last segment that we've been doing on the show now for a while, where we get to recognize members of the community for doing really awesome things, going and pushing their own boundaries, their own limits in our, GR Crew Member of the Week. I wrote it down differently down here. So Kim, who is our GR Crew Member of the Week this week?
This week's GR Crew Member of the Week is Ingen, the one and only Ingen that you guys see in the chat room all the time. Ingen wrote that she ran a Tiger Claw loop this weekend. I think she did yellow loop this weekend. She says she felt the sunshine on her face, and it was the first time that she has hit 10 miles since before her injury this past summer. So congratulations, Ingen. We're happy to be having you back at Tiger Claw this year. And we hope your kids bring posters again, because those are one of my favorite parts of the race last year.
Yeah. Shout out to Ingen. Nice job out there. And again, thank you to all of our Patreon crew for supporting us. 2 individuals at that top tier, specifically Chris Lee and Brian Sands. Both of those gentlemen just have been wonderful and supporting us for a long time now. Chris Lee's out of Hong Kong with his organization Trailblazer, and Brian Sands and his inspirational story of losing over 100 pounds, running his first marathon, first 50K. He is a badass who is training for some big stuff this year, and we're going to get to see him at Tiger Claw, which is also really great. So shout out to those 2 individuals. We are going to move into our after show with Jade. We thank you so much for tuning in to Ginger Runner Live 294 and all the 293 episodes before this, because we're at 6 years. Cannot believe it. Happy 6-year anniversary. Thank you. And congratulations to you.
I was there for some of it.
Yeah, okay. No big deal. Our 300th episode is obviously coming up soon, and that should be a really big, fun celebration as well. But
you might have to dust off the tux.
Ooh.
The suit.
I was like, I don't have it.
You wore some sort of suit.
Whatever it was, I think it wasn't mine.
It was just paper.
It was just paper. Join us next week for Ginger Runner Live 295. We'll have Myrna Valerio, the Myrnavator, will be on the show next week. So that should be a lot of fun, very inspiring episode as well. You know the drill. Get out there, train hard, race harder, and party the hardest. We'll see y'all next week for more Ginger Runner Live. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.